Hello, hello, hello everyone. Once again, I am the Fish, and today I'm going to bring you guys another 4 versus 4 strategy video that you can try at home. Now, to start off with a bit about myself, I'm a Diamond League random player on the North American servers, and I've been playing Starcraft 2 since before Brood War came out when I was just a little kid. And I've gotten pretty good at doing 4 versus 4. I like to experiment with different strategies, but this strategy is going to be a very simple but very effective Zerg strategy. It doesn't take a whole lot of APM to really pull it off, and I'd say it's actually a bit too easy for how powerful it is. And even Blizzard kind of admits that, you know, the Mutalisk is pretty strong against Protoss, and when controlled properly, the Mutalisk can be extremely cost effective, especially in the 4 versus 4 format, just because of how annoying you can be and how much you can throw off your opponents. So when you get a bunch of good teammates on your side, like I did in this game, you can be really effective. So now I want to start by going into a little bit about the build order, and right off the bat you'll notice something weird. I get an extra Overlord very quickly. In this particular game I got a little too quickly, but it doesn't really matter. The point is that you want to get your second Overlord out quick. And this is going to be a fast expand, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be throwing down my second hatchery around 15 supply, so that's pretty standard. And then around 16 supply, I'm going to be throwing down my spawning pool, and right after that it's going to be into extractor. So I want to just talk a little bit about the peculiarities of this build. In this particular game, I decided to skip metabolic boost completely. And one of the reasons for that is my spawning location. If you'll notice, I'm in the very bottom left of the map, and I'm in a very safe spot. I've got a Protoss player on both sides of me, to my north and to my east, that are going to basically be protecting me, so I feel very safe. And I realize that, you know, with this kind of map, it's very macro-oriented, and I can pretty much am free to get Mutalisks out and do a lot of damage. Now, when do you not want to do this build? Well, of course, in, say, a map like Lava Flow, or if you get spawned in a very vulnerable position, you have to use your discretion and say, well, you know, maybe I shouldn't just try and tech up to Mutalisk immediately, because I could probably get attacked very early. And that is one of the downsides to this build. If you get hit with like three Protoss players, 4 getting you all at once, there's pretty much nothing you can do to stop it. You're just going to lose. So the 7-minute mark is the most dangerous mark for you, and it's important to pay attention to what your opponents are doing as well as what your teammates are doing, of course. So now you'll notice that I've got my extractor up, and I've got my second hatchery going, and the reason I got that second Overlord so quickly is so that right now I can do 2 queens, and I can continue producing drones. And then of course I'm going to be needing another Overlord at this point, and I'm going to be throwing 3 drones into my extractor so I can start mining gas. Now, like I said, I'm going to be skipping metabolic boost so that hopefully as soon as my first queens are done, my first 2 queens, I can just immediately tech up to lair. So after that, it stays pretty simple. Once you've gotten your lair out, it's basically, you want to save up as much gas as you can. So usually as soon as I get my 2 queens and my lair started, it's going to be just worry about getting drones and worry about getting gas. So now if you'll notice, I start my lair at around 5 minutes, which is, you know, pretty early. And then immediately as soon as my lair is done, I throw down 3 more gas because I want to start stockpiling gas for when I get my Mutalisks out. So now at this point in the game, I'm focusing on getting drones and not getting supply blocked. I might be scouting a little bit or relying on my teammates to do that. I don't really need any more queens at this point. I want to save up my minerals for more drones and overlords. And I want to, you know, make sure I'm hitting my injections. I don't need to spread creep either, so that's another reason you only get 2 queens. But now if you'll notice, I'm not really worried about minerals so much at this point. I've got a pretty good income of minerals, and now I'm just concentrating on making sure that I'm getting enough gas. So my layer is going to be almost done here. And this is a really crucial moment. It's about 6.5 minutes into the game, and in like the next 30 seconds to a minute of game time, really powerful attacks could come your way. And if you look, I've got pretty much no defense. I've just got drones, 2 queens, and overlords. Like, that's it. So you're very vulnerable at this moment, and that's why I say it's important to pay attention to your spawning location, to make sure that you're actually going to be in a good spot to be doing this build. But if it's executed properly and you don't get attacked early, it can be very, very hard for your opponent to hold off. So now you'll notice that I threw down my Spire, and I did that as pretty much as quickly as I could. But that comes secondary to making sure I have a good gas income. And I'm continuing to produce drones. If you look, I think I get up to about 50 drones. And at this point I noticed that the enemy is coming at our base with some Dark Templars, so I'm going to throw down some Spine Crawlers. And if you notice, I've got some minerals to do this. Not a big deal. I can afford to throw away a couple of drones, and I'm morphing 2 Overseers just because, but that's just because of the Dark Templars. So if you'll notice, my Spire's about to pop, and my supply is, I've got about 30 free supply, and you want to make sure that you got enough Overlords. I don't know if I mentioned this enough times yet, but that's very key. You want to be able to, right now you'll see that I'm starting to produce Mutalisks. And don't really worry too much if you don't have enough minerals right when your Spire pops, because, like I said, the most important thing is gas. You're never going to really be too low. You're never going to really be too low on minerals with this build. So in this particular case, I also skipped Metabolic Boost, if you notice that. I skipped Metabolic Boost to get my layer out very quickly, but you got to remember that at some point you are going to want to get Metabolic Boost, and you're probably going to want to get a macro hatchery, pretty quickly, and start getting Zerglings. You're also going to want to do double Evo Chamber at some point so you can start getting upgrades for your Zerglings. But really, the key thing to concentrate on at this part of the game is to get about 8 Mutalisks out, maybe 8 to 10, and to start attacking the enemy. Now, you'll see me get a Baneling Nest just for security reasons. I noticed that one of my opponents was going Mass Marines, so that's just a bit of luck. What you want to do is you want to rally. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to control your Mutalisks. You want to rally when you press, you press 1, you select your hatcheries, then you hit S, you hit T to warp in or start building a few more Mutalisks. Then what you want to do is click on one of your Mutalisks so that they start flying towards your Mutalisk ball. And you want to be very careful at this point of the game. When you've only got maybe 10 Mutalisks, you want to be careful not to lose them. And you'll see that my allies are going to come in and they're going to start attacking, but you don't want to throw away all your Mutalisks at this point of the game. It's a good way to lose. As long as you've got some Mutalisks on the field that are able to do damage to your opponent, it's much better to keep them alive than to sacrifice them, to trade them for some other units. Because usually the Mutalisks are very strong. So a little bit about controlling your Mutalisks. I like to keep them a little bit spread out, because I've noticed that the DTs are on the field, Archons can be a possibility, and you don't really want to keep them clumped together too much. So you'll notice that when I attack with them, a lot of the times I send them to attack past the enemy units, and then I'll hit the S key, that's the stop command, and they'll automatically attack whatever's underneath them. So that's a good way to do, pretty good splash damage against enemy units. But like I said, you notice that I didn't engage the enemy forces there because it was all Stalkers and Marines, and my Mutalisk would have gotten torn to shreds, and then I wouldn't be able to continue harassing our opponents. So you're going to have to leave it up to your teammates to do a lot of the ground fighting. But once you get up to a nice sized ball of Mutalisks, you can actually start engaging ground units. And here I'm up to, I think, 15. And I've got upgrades starting. That's another thing I forgot to mention. As soon as your Spire finishes, start getting +1 attacks or +1 carapace, whatever is your preference. So that way you can, start getting your Mutalisks upgraded really quickly. And that'll help a lot, especially the carapace if you're going up against Terran or Zergs, and I would recommend going more for the attack upgrades if you're going up against Protoss. But it really doesn't matter. Just make sure you're getting a lot of upgrades. So if you notice, I'm floating a ton of resources here, and that's mostly because I've just been microing my Mutalisks. And that's another thing that's good about this build. It's kind of easy that you can just let your hatcheries just produce larvae on their own. You don't have to worry too much about hitting every injection possible once you've got your Mutalisk ball floating in the air. But at some point with this build, you're going to want to get a ton of Zerglings also. So that's why you see me get 2 macro hatcheries. The rule of thumb is 1 extra hatchery per base. So 4 hatcheries if you're on 2 base. And if you notice here, look at the way I'm engaging the enemy units. I'm making sure that my Mutalisks are flying right on top of all these Immortals. That way, these Immortals and my friendly units can tank all the damage for my Mutalisks, and they can just provide supporting damage. Now, of course, you want to be, you want to be careful not to run into any splash damage when you're doing that. But if you do that, you keep your Mutalisks behind, sort of behind the friendly line of units. It can help them to not get hit, and it can really help your friendly units to do more damage. So if you notice there, I just started +2 attacks for my Mutas, and I'm getting a ton of Zerglings. I actually forgot to get Metabolic Boost this game, but it's not going to really matter too much. Again, I'm mostly just flying around with this flock of Mutalisks, and in this game there were actually, it was all Diamond and Masters League players. So I mean, these guys are no pushovers, and I am just sticking on 2 base though. I would recommend trying to go for a 3rd at some point. Of course, it's not essential because you can really get a pretty decent sized pack of Mutalisks and a ton of Zerglings just off 2 bases. But if you can get a 3rd base, you become very, very hard to stop. Of course, if you do get a 3rd base, you're going to have a lot of income, which is going to allow you to maybe tech into Broodlords for the late game or something like that. So the point of this build isn't to do a 2 base sort of all in. It's to do a Muta Ling style, where you focus on getting Mutalisks out as quickly as possible. And you'll see there that I started getting a ton of more Zerglings. And that's one thing you can do towards the late game, is upgraded Zerglings in the late game can be super annoying. You can run them into enemy bases, you can use them to take out Marines or engage with Marines. And that's another example of me flying my Mutas into position and then hitting stop. I didn't want them to get hit by a Psionic Storm or by Archons or Thors or something. So by keeping them spread out like that in like a box formation, it allows them to still do a lot of damage. But if I do run into an Archon like this, I can, take it out pretty quickly with minimal damage. Now again, I do the same thing here, and you'll see, I think you'll see me try and spread these Mutalisks out a little bit. Of course they will clump up, but once they do that, you want to just use the stop key. It's really going to be your friend. It'll help to keep the Mutalisks from clumping together. And this kind of situation in the bottom right is where it's good to have some supporting Zerglings. You'll see me use them to try and deal with these Marines. And so Zergling Mutalisk, very powerful build, and that's basically it. I think I covered most of the things that are, most of the nuances about this build. My biggest piece of advice is to make sure you get upgrades and keep your Mutalisks spread out in such a way that they're not going to all get destroyed by a few fungal growths or a storm or a Thor or something like that. And yeah, that's really the key thing. And you can really be annoying. You can end the game with Mutalisks like this. And of course, transitions into this is, of course, you can just keep getting Mutalisks. I've had games where I just go for high tech just to try and get 3/3 upgrades for my Mutalisks, but usually the game ends before that. Doing a build like this, most of the games are going to either end with you getting destroyed in the first 7 minutes, or you're probably going to win if you execute it properly. It's really hard to hold it off, especially when you're going up against a lot of Protoss, like I just did. So I guess that's really the nuances and different parts of the build. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you've got any questions, you can feel free to post them in the comments section. I will read them and I will try to respond. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't be afraid to subscribe or give me a like, and thank you for watching.